All right, Battletech enthusiasts, we are continuing our Assault Mech review. And in this podcast, in this vlog, we are looking at the Atlas, the pinnacle, the top, the perhaps most feared mech in the inner sphere before we start branching out into the clans and other future tech. So when playing this mech, what makes this mech so potent? And the secondary question is, does the Atlas live up to its name? Is the Atlas a mech that you should be afraid of and you should fear on the tabletop versus, say, other similar mechs like the Stalker? So I like to begin these mech reviews by first examining the weapon systems and how fast the mech can move, because this is going to determine the role of the mech in the lance, and it's going to determine any weaknesses that it may have, which now we have two options. In Battletech, if you have a mech that has some serious weaknesses, and this could be it's prone to heat, right? If you fire off all the weapons, you have to deal with heat. It could be that the weapons are above average and you're lacking armor or you're lacking speed. Or it could be like in the example, and look, I love the longbow. If you've been listening to any of my podcasts, I love long-range missiles. I love the longbow. But this has taken all of the battle value and focused it literally on long range, LRM 20 packs and 5 packs if we're talking stock. If you can sneak in a mech, even a medium mech, into that longbow under the minimum range and stuff, I'm in a lot of trouble. So looking and seeing how are the weapons matched and how do they work from there. In that case, you have two options. And this is also something we need to look at, I believe, for the Atlas. A glaring weakness of a mech. Do you solve it? Do you stop it by having additional mechs in your lance, so your list, to kind of take care of it? Or do you have a way to keep your opponent busy so they can't exploit that weakness? And both are valid options. So as the Atlas, we have the autocannon. We have the LRM 20. We have the short-range missile pack, and we have medium lasers on there. We're talking stock. So you have the top damage-dealing weapons at every single range. At long range, I'm going to open up with that 20 pack. I'd like two 20 packs for the redundancy, but certainly the potency of a 20 over a 15, 10, or 5 is massive even for one. There's a fine line when we start looking at the LRMs where a 5 and 10 pack, if you hit, if you connect, an average dice roll, it's going to do a little bit of damage. I mean, you can take it. If the dice roll is above average to see how many missiles hit, it's still manageable. As soon as you get into a 15 pack, as soon as you get into a 20 pack, let's look at a 20 pack, an average dice roll is still going to inflict some serious damage, some decent damage. A legendary roll, 19, 20 missiles hit. That's big. That is a big cluster hit. That is a lot of damage. So right away, the Atlas, as it's walking in, it has that to push out, either in a support roll or softening up. As we move into the kind of the medium range, well, now it's going to open up with that autocannon 20. Now it's going to open up with the medium lasers. And the medium lasers are certainly the workhorse of it. Medium lasers, I believe, are the most potent weapon in the game when we look at tonnage to mount, when we look at internals to power, when we look at the cost of it, when we examine damage output versus heat. Maybe we could argue a large laser is slightly better, but then once you move into something like a PPC, yes, the damage is there, but the heat ratio to damage, it's a lot for a lot of mechs to deal with. The autocannon 20 firing at long range, it's probably not going to hit, right? Let's just kind of do the, let's crunch the battle numbers here. Let's say I'm an average pilot, so I'm hitting you on 4s. So we're at 4. You're at long range for my autocannon 20. So we're at 8. I'm running. We're up to 10. You're going to be moving a number of hexes to close with me. I'm going to need 12s. 11s and 12s to hit you. Am I going to hit? Look, do you want me to roll that damage? Do you want me to roll to try and hit? Or would we rather skip it? This is the first thing about what I believe the power of the Atlas. As soon as that autocannon 20 is in range, you're going to start shooting with it. And even though your opponent's mind is like, look, it's not going to connect. It's not going to connect. But in that moment, you know they're watching your dice. you know they're like, please don't connect. Please don't connect. The challenge versus other mechs, because certainly there's other mechs in the Battletech universe that mount AC-20s. I'm a firm believer in the philosophy of big guns never tire. You can have your fancy lances. You can have your fancy tactics. You can have your multiple mech support roles. As soon as I start laying into your lines with multiple autocannon 20s or hundreds and hundreds of long-range missiles, those tactics are going to go out the window really fast. And what I mean by that is that people notice an autocannon 20. Compare that to, say, a hunchback. Compare that to some of the other mechs where the autocannon 20 is the show stealer, right? The focus is on, like the hunchback, even though the weight class is vastly different. It's like, let me mount an autocannon 20 on legs. It's going to get up there. It's going to try and do some damage. But in theory, that's all it has. So you might want to be a little liberal based on ammo, or you might want to really try to see and go after certain select targets with it. You need to make decisions. Because the Atlas has the ammo, because the Atlas has multiple other weapons at other ranges, the autocannon 20, which is so fearful, is actually a bonus. So I feel like as soon as this thing is even remotely in range, I'm flipping the switch and I'm starting to send some slugs down the table at you, right? We're just going to pound away. Things get a lot more tense as it closes, because now you're firing that autocannon 20 and you suddenly find yourself at a medium range or a short range. You've got the lasers firing at a medium, firing at a short range. When you get to danger close, when you get to point blank, the Atlas has the tonnage to do the damage. And this is where I feel like the location for the autocannon 20 is key. You're still able to fire it and you're still able to punch away. I mean, imagine the close range brutality of an Atlas. Punching, kicking, firing off its weapons is insane with that. But that insanity is boosted by the fact that the armor on it, the protection on it, is crazy in itself. So what's your option in dealing with it? Okay, you could outgun it. Now this is where we get into the challenges of the Atlas. For the battle value, for the weapons, it's only one mech. It's only one thing on the table. Now, this is where I find the effectiveness of it really kind of branches out. Are we talking traditional hex maps, or are we talking a more traditional wargaming setup table on there? There's no right or wrong way to play Battletech. And personally, I would say 90% of my games involve a traditional wargaming table. That's kind of my narrative with Warhammer 40,000 and historicals and other things. I'm used to playing on that. And we get everything 3D, the trees and the mountains and the buildings, and everything's WYSIWYG. Underneath this podcast, underneath this vlog, is a link to my blog. On there, you could easily sort by Battletech and see a lot of the terrain that I play on. I think it does a great job of immersing you into the Battletech universe. That said, I do use hex maps if we're playing at a club or I'm playing at the shop or the store where space is extremely limited. You know, we've literally got like a card table by the door. And you know, whatever Battletech you're playing, half the table is going to be Battletech mech sheets, dice, trackers, and tokens. I don't have a lot of room, so we'll go on a hex map. The challenge here is, with a hex map, it's artificially constrained to be a faster and quicker game, because you've cut down the places you can move. These hex maps are not that big. In that case, the Atlas becomes magnified and is a lot more fearsome on there. Where are you going to run? I'm going to possibly be able to chase you down, despite how slow the mech is, which I don't think it's overly slow for the tonnage. But my LRMs, they're going to have range everywhere. And I'm going to be able to catch you eventually with the medium lasers. And I'm going to be able to catch you. Compare that to a traditional wargaming table where literally you can advance, and as you engage with your opponent, if you find things unfavorable, you could fade back. You have a lot of room. In that case, the bigger the gaming area, the less potent the Atlas is, because it's one piece. It can't be everywhere at once. So flipping this over, how do we deal with that as an Atlas pilot? You have to look at the mission. If you try and chase down, and this is true for really any wargaming system, but especially for Battletech, especially with the way the initiative order works, and the size and battle value of the map versus the mechs. I can't chase you down. I don't want to chase you down. I have to look at the mission and say, where is the contact point going to be? For an example, the best example would be if I have to attack your base, right? You've got a base, maybe you're defending a dropship landing area, or you're getting stuff off the map. You have a central point that I know my opponent is going to be there. Yes, I'm going to send out some light mechs to skirmish. Yes, I'm going to try and outflank. But my Atlas is going right towards the center of your base. It's going to just slowly walk in there. It is heading right into there. And you're going to have to engage it. If there's a mission where we have to take the high ground or we have to defend a certain point on the table, that's where I'm sending the Atlas. If there is a portion on the table that the terrain offers a tremendous advantage, you have to occupy this terrain piece. You have to occupy this ridge. The tactical advantage is too much. That's where I'm sending the Atlas. So you need to know kind of where you're going ahead of time, and that's how you deal with a much, much bigger map. Flipping back over. You're spending that much battle value, in theory, and that leaves you vulnerable to being outclassed. The Atlas, despite its fearsome nature, not only can't be everywhere, as it engages danger close, and I define danger close as 1 to 4 hexes away. This is where now we're in it. You know, this is Battletech. The mechs are not fast enough unless you're a light mech. You can't withdraw quick enough. If you turn and run and give me your back, I'm going to just destroy you, especially if it's a heavier and assault mech. So yeah, you can backpedal, but I'll also be able to advance. We're at that point blank range. That's it. Hopefully I've weakened you. Hopefully I've taken down a mech or two. Hopefully I have some supporting units in good terrain with good elevation that could add on some firepower. But in that little circle of mechs, as we do that dance, we're there at danger close. In this situation, despite the Atlas being amazing, and yes, it's going to stay around. It's going to hold its own unless you get a lucky headshot or some sort of crit, but that could happen to any mech. It is vulnerable to being outnumbered, outflanked. If I have 2 heavies and a medium and a light going against it, I'm going to get side. I'm going to get rear. There's no way that you can stop me from doing that on there. So looking at it from that perspective, you have to look and say the battle value. Is it worth it? Which leads us to the last piece. When should you interject the Atlas into the game? Now, certainly, there are certain mechs, and I have quite a big collection. It's a little bit out of control with Battletech, both in the lances that I run, but also other lances that I built. So if a friend wants to play Battletech, or we bring in some other Battletech players and we do a 2, 3, 4, 5 person game, there is enough mech diversity that every player can pick and play whatever mechs they like. That was my goal years ago in kind of building my collection the way I built it. So there are mechs in there that I enjoy. There are mechs in there that are good, but I don't really play because they're not my favorite mechs. And then there's mechs like the Awesome that I will always play. The Blackjack that I will always play. The Archers, the Longbows, the Warhammers, the Marauders, the Battlemasters, where this list of mechs where if I can play it, I'm going to play it, even if it's not the best mech on the table. The challenge here is if you feel that way with the Atlas, and the Atlas is certainly a great mech. I've certainly been known to play it. In my 2, I have 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it, mercenary companies. I have Atlases in 2 of the companies, my Grey Death Legion and my Dogs of War. So it's a potent mech. But in lower battle value games, and this is just my opinion on it, from 0 to 4,000 battle value, this is a lower battle value type game. You are vulnerable where if you spend the points for that Atlas, if your opponent takes some potent but lower level mechs, some of the higher end mediums or some tanks, demolisher tanks or other tanks that are going to engage that have raw firepower but less battle value, you run the risk of being outclassed on guns and material alone, right? It's the eternal argument. Quality versus quantity. Quantity has a quality all of its own on there. But as soon as we move up into the higher battle value, where I think if we go 5 to 8 or 5 to 10, well, really 5 to 8, 8 to 10 is completely different. Well, now you have enough that you could take some really powerful toys like the Atlas, But you can also cover your bases elsewhere, so if people try to counter the Atlas, there's enough material going on the table. So I think that it needs to be examined from that perspective of where does it fit in, what is the battle value, and what type of game are we playing? Your thoughts, though. If you were facing down the Atlas, you're a mech warrior. You've got a ping on the comms. You're going over that hill. You've got the fusion engine picking it up. It's obviously an assault class. You turn that, and now you're staring at that death's head right there. Even if you're piloting a heavy mech, right? What mechs kind of make you nervous? I think the Atlas would do it. The only other mech that makes me as nervous, or perhaps possibly more nervous, would be the Stalker.